All right. So good evening, everyone. Well, I saw Soraya from Suriname was here and she hopped off, but got distracted there. But it's just well, I see it. Okay, Raheem. All right, again distracted. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our session this afternoon. It's just a few of us, but we roll with one. We go with what we have and we have fun with it. So this week we are continuing our skills training session. And as I would have said last week, for those who may have been able to be part of those sessions, we would have founded this really incredible group of young people. But we can't assume that, first of all, everyone has these skills to navigate what would be required to take the chapter forward. And even if we have these skills, sometimes you just need a little refresher to just get the brain working already. If it's someone like me who just forget things a little easily from time to time. So this week we have our events committee, trainings with Miss Dezan Billy. We'll call her Dezan, which is fine. And she knows that it's fine. So if you would have signed up for the events committee, now I know nearly everyone here is in a committee. If you had signed up, again, I said when all the sessions is over, we will add everyone um to the different committees that you would have signed up for once they attended the session. But Dezan Billy is a communications and digital marketing specialist, freelance writer, and passionate advocate for climate justice. As the Caribbean Regional Director at Climate Tracker, a global youth-led journalism network, Ms. Billy works to amplify Caribbean climate stories and empower regional journalists to report on critical environmental issues. With an MSc in Global Studies, Design's research focused on the effectiveness of global environmental governance in advancing the biodiversity agenda. She is a dedicated climate communicator, publishing insightful work and leading discussions on climate change locally, regionally, and internationally. Dezan is the former president of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, Trinidad and Tobago chapter. Very, I would say, controversially supposed to be in Trinidad and Tobago, but that's a whole other story for another day. And she's currently a committed mentor in the Girl Scout Caribbean program, where she supports and guides young Caribbean climate activists. Dezan is also affiliated with Island Innovation as an island ambassador, further strengthening her advocacy for sustainable development in islands nations. So, Dezan, the show spotlight is all yours.
Hi everyone. Okay, so thank you so much, Tyrell, for introducing me to the group. I'm just really excited to be here, to be honest, and to share a little of, I guess, a little bit of what I have learned being in this space for the past couple years. I don't want to give away my age, um, but being here for a couple years, and just it's a learning process, and just being in this space, you learn something new every day.
Excuse Dezan,
And
now I am hearing you. Sorry for that, but I think
mhm.
Katrina said the audio isn't working. So again, I could hear you. I'm not sure if it's something. Could everyone else
Is
hear
that
Dezan?
better? Can you hear me?
All right, so okay, good. I see some other people saying yes.
Okay, Katrina, you might need to leave and come back. We will miss you until you're back. But yeah, so as I was saying, it's just in this space you learn something new every day, and I'm really honored to be able to share some of what I've learned. As it's two nights that I'll be, well, nights for me because I'm actually, like, if you're in Trinidad, I'm 5 hours ahead of you. If you're as far as Belize, then I'm 7 hours ahead of you. So at the moment. But For tonight and tomorrow night, what I've done is I've split it up into two parts. So tonight we'll be talking a little bit about online training, and then tomorrow we'll be talking about the in-person training and how to go about these two methods of interaction with people. All right, so I'm gonna go straight into it, if that's okay. Um, and what we're going to talk about today is really how to use to have engaging, effective, and impactful virtual sessions. Right? We know that since the dawn of, I would say, 2020, it's when a lot of our interactions, shifted to the online space, and being able to harness that space in a good way that can effectively engage and leave impact on those who you engage with is of crucial importance. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. All right, but before I start, I want to do a little bit of an icebreaker, if that's okay with you. And the icebreaker that I'm gonna do today is just if you could, in the chat, drop an emoji that describes how your day is going so far. So if you have had a good day, if you had a bad day, an indifferent day, if you ate a lot of pasta today, like me, I had some pasta with mushrooms that I made today and it was so tasty. So that's probably the emoji I should drop. But just drop an emoji in the chat to describe how your day has been, and let's see how that goes. I see Sasha. Sasha looks like she slept in today. Lucky you, Sasha. Sasha, Gay, Luke, and who else? You feel free to drop your emoji in the chat. I'm looking out for it. So, Sasha, I hope you had a good dream. I don't know if you slept, if you were just in. Sometimes you just like in bed and watching Netflix or watching, catching up on your latest series or whatever. It doesn't always mean that you're sleeping. Bianca went walking, I think. I don't know. How many steps did you make today, Bianca? I think I made like 6,000 steps today, which is great. So, how many steps did you make, Bianca? I would love to know. And Sasha, I really hope that you feel better soon. And, Tamika went to, I'm gonna say she studied and maybe she studied or she read, and then she had um a snow cone. Tamika, I don't know. I'm gonna guess that you did some reading and then you had a really, really good snow cone. Maybe you went, I don't know if you're from Trinidad and you went to Port of Spain and you went to National Library and then there's a snow cone guy right outside of the library that sells good snow cones. and um and Tyrell, seems like Tyrell was in a fight today. He was fighting, I'm guessing, for the Caribbean, and the betterment of the Caribbean as it refers to biodiversity. So Tamika went for, oh, she studied and then she went for boba with her friends. That is great. Um, I did do some reading today as well, so I can understand. And then Angelique attended Chinese lessons for International Chinese Language Day. Wow, that's amazing. So if you can type like your favorite Chinese word in the chat, that would be great, Angelique. So I'm gonna go on. Um, just moving on a little bit. So, what are we gonna talk about today, guys? We're talking about online training, and then tomorrow we'll be talking about in-person training. All right. So, just to go through what we're learning today, we're going to try to understand some of the key principles of effective online facilitation. We're going to learn some of the tools and the techniques to boost participant engagement, and then we're going to learn a little bit of some of the challenges, because it's not all honky dory. So, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the solutions that we can use to overcome those challenges in the online space? All right, so getting into it. Um, what are some of the challenges? And sometimes we think of things as being just strictly challenges, but sometimes challenges can be opportunities as well. So let's just looking at why online training is so different and how online training differs from in-person sessions. When we consider online training versus in-person sessions, I think it's really important to recognize that they are fundamentally different experiences, right? Not just in the format, but also in the dynamics of the communication, the engagement, and the delivery. Some of the things that you can do online, you can't do in person, and some of the things that you can do in person, you can't do online, right? So I thought we would just like break it down into some of the challenges and the opportunities, right? So some of the challenges when if you try to delve into online training, you can look at shorter attention spans, and I don't know if you guys have noticed just how our attention span is just like shrinking, because we're getting so used to just like scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through your reels, scrolling if you still use Facebook, scrolling through Facebook, and our attention spans are really shrinking. So how do we combat that, right? And what that looks like in the wider scope of things is a reduced human connection. Um, and that is a challenge when it comes to online training. It In an in-person session, you can read body language, you can make eye contact. Like for instance, right now I'm talking to a screen. I can't even see you guys' faces, right? I'm talking to a screen. I'm seeing my presentation, and that's it. I can't see your face, right? So I can't read your body language. I don't know what Angelique is feeling right now. I can't see what Tyrell is like. I can't see his face to have an idea of what he's thinking right now. So in the in-person session, you can read body language, you can make eye contact, you can build rapport, right, through informal moments like chatting during a break or walking into a room, but online, much of that is lost, right? So non-verbal cues is what we have to pick up on in online training. And there's often a sense of emotional distance. So yes, I right now I am in Lisbon, in Portugal. Some of you are maybe in Jamaica, some of you might be in Trinidad, some of you might be in Guyana, Grenada, right? St. Lucia, I don't know. But we're in many different places experiencing different environments and different realities, and all of that creates a lot of emotional distance. So these are some things that you have to take into consideration when you are developing an online training, or you're developing online training sessions for people, right? What you have to actually try to overcome these challenges to create more of a human connection online, right? So the shorter attention spans as well. Research actually shows that people have shorter attention spans online, especially in front of a screen for extended periods. And the temptation, I know that you know what I'm speaking about here. The temptation to multitask is also much higher. People may actually be checking emails, scrolling on their phones while I'm speaking. I might be speaking right now, and one of you might be scrolling through TikTok or checking to checking to see what is the score on a game somewhere. I don't know. So the temptation to multitask as well sort of like pulls out your participants' attention in many different directions, right? And all of that also is linked to technology dependence, because everything hinges on stable internet connections, functional devices, platforms like Zoom or Teams actually behaving themselves, right? You never know what could happen. I don't know if you've ever experienced Zoom bombing, but I have, and it left me with a little bit of PTSD in that like you carry on a session, and then that Zoom bombing is when you're on a session and then somebody hacks the call, and they start maybe playing very vulgar videos or audio for your entire audience to see, and it leaves you with a scar, right? So these are some of the challenges that we have to look at and we have to consider and we have to think how we can overcome these things, right? Another one, and I don't think I have it like listed there, but another one is that engagement online actually takes more effort, right? You have to create um, energy in an online space. It doesn't happen as naturally as it does in a physical room. It requires more intentional design to keep people involved through interactivity. So you might consider things like polls, breakout rooms, chats, etc. Right, to actually keep people involved, engaged, because in person it's easy for people to just like bounce ideas off of each other, and humans are social beings, right? At the end of the day, sometimes we might be introverts, we might be extroverts, but we are social beings and we do need each other and we do bounce off of each other. So in person, it's much easier to have that natural engagement, but online, it takes a little bit more effort, right? It takes a little bit more effort to create that space where people can engage, right? So that's something to consider as well. And then also online, you have limited natural feedback. So in person, you can see someone nodding their head, right? I can see Tyrell nodding his head in person. I can see Angelique maybe looking a little bit confused in person, and I would be able to understand that. A light bulb moment for somebody in the room is something that I can pick up on in person. But online, you don't have that sort of feedback naturally. So online participants, may have cameras off, they might be muted. So you're often talking to a digital void, is what it feels like sometimes, with very little real time feedback. So, given all of these challenges, now you have to put yourself in a place where you find the solutions to these challenges, or you turn these challenges into opportunities, right? So, some of the opportunities that, so I'm moving now from challenges to opportunities. I'm gonna change these challenges into opportunities, right? So, some of the opportunities in online training is that you might look at the fact that it's more accessible, right? So, you can consider accessibility and reach. Online training actually opens doors for people who may not have been able to attend an event, right? So whereas we can see it as a challenge that we're all in different places, but that's also an opportunity to reach into different places, isn't it? Right? So you may not be able to travel due to geography, finances, personal constraints, whatever, but at the end of the day, if you give me a link and I have Wi-Fi, I can be there. You know what I mean? So you can think of it as increased accessibility, increased reach, geographically, in a situation where, for instance, I'm having an event in Trinidad and Tobago. I might not be able to fly in somebody from Grenada, but if I'm having an event online, then I can have people from the entire Caribbean showing up for that event and making an input, right? So it actually allows you to work with a more diverse group. You are actually allowed to have more diverse participants from across the region, across the globe, right from your desk. So, for instance, I can give you an example. So, I work with Climate Tracker, and what we do is we create opportunities for journalists across the region and the Caribbean, well, across the world, but I focus on the Caribbean. And we create opportunities for journalists to get training to report on climate issues, right? And for instance, because of the online space, we're able to have in the last cohort of our climate justice fellowship, for instance, representatives from 15 different Caribbean countries. That would have been so expensive to do if it's something that we had to do in person. So that accessibility and that reach, it's three, four, five times the fold of what you can do in person in terms of accessibility and reach. So turning the challenges into opportunities, right? Another opportunity um, that is at our hands because of online training is flexibility in design. So because of online training, you can actually mix live sessions with asynchronous elements like pre-recorded videos or reading materials, and sessions can actually be shorter and spread out over days or weeks to reduce the burnout and increase retention, right? So online training allows you to basically do it in bits, right? You can do a lot in in a more in a more flexible way, right? You can design your event, you can design your training sessions, you can design your webinars, whatever it is. You can design it in a way where people can actually absorb, retain, and understand easier, right? With a better understanding of the human behavior and human psychology behind um, actual education. All right, so we can go into that for a long time, but also one of the other opportunities that online events provide is scalability. So you can actually train 10 people or 100 people in the same session, right? Depending on your platform, of course, depending on your goals, of course. But because of the online space, you can actually scale it up a lot more, right? Depending on other factors. And it's easier to repeat sessions, create series without that logistical overhead, like venue bookings and travel planning and all of that. You can actually just create more sessions and create more series and actually dive deeper online. And I honestly, I have seen the benefit of that as an opportunity in the space that I work with at Climate Tracker, right? And leading into that, another opportunity is just the cost effectiveness of it also. There's no travel cost, there's no accommodation. You don't have to pay for printed materials. I can just send you all this presentation, right? At the end of it, and participants can also join from wherever they are with just a link. And that also makes it more budget friendly for everyone involved, right? So I hope that you guys are actually learning from this session. And then there's also another opportunity, and what I like to do is actually, but I keep saying this over and over because it's genuinely how I feel, is to turn challenges into opportunities. And this opportunity specifically, I think, is very important for the work that we do at Climate Tracker, and that is to use rich or use digital tools that create rich experiences, right? So platforms like Zoom, which we're all familiar with after COVID, platforms like Miro, if you're familiar with Miro, Mentimeter, Google Docs, Slack. These allow for real-time collaboration, live polling, interactive discussions. You can use these multimedia as well to do videos, music, quizzes, to just diversify your content in ways that is harder to execute in person. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. But the online space allows you to just use more multimedia, and where that is where our mind space is going, is not is going, but that's where our mind space generally is, right? In terms of videos, music, quizzes, these that's what we that's the content that we're being sort of, I can go into like the indoctrination of it all, but that's the space that we're going into, in terms of the content that we give we relate to, right? So the online space allows for that. And then I think the last opportunity that I want to talk about as well is the automatic recordings and analytics. Now, in the marketing space, something that we always talk about is that, one of the benefits of doing digital marketing is that you know exactly who you're reaching, and and how to reach them. In traditional marketing, it was more of a sense of you create your content and you share it, and whoever sees it, sees it. Who sees the billboard? You have no idea that Jane saw the billboard at 5 p.m. when they were driving on the northbound highway, you know. But with digital marketing, when you put things online, you can see that Jane watched your video at 5 p.m. when she was going home from work, right? So the automatic recordings and the analytics is just dynamic when it comes to online sessions and online event training. Many platforms offer the option to record sessions, which is super helpful for participants who may miss out or want to review content afterwards. And also, some tools also provide data like how many people engage with your poll, how much time they spent in breakout rooms, which which presentations they found useful, if you do polls and follow-up quizzes, and this can also help improve your future sessions. So this is one of the things I love about the digital space. I'll say digital marketing because that's what I'm involved in a lot. But just the digital space is that you can actually dive into the analytics, dive into the statistics, and understand what is working and what is not working. Because a lot of times, you try the A/B testing, you try this, you try that, and then you understand, okay, so this is working. I'm going to continue doing more of that, and I'll just reduce my efforts and my resources in the other pool. So that understanding analytics, understanding the online digital space in that way is very, very useful for your future event planning and your training and understanding what people actually need to learn and so on. Okay, so online training, in summary of this whole thing, challenges, business opportunities. Online training is not just in-person training with a webcam. It actually requires a different mindset. It actually requires a different skill set. Not everybody can actually set up a proper online event, right? It actually, I think the lack of a physical presence is real, yes, but it doesn't have to be a limitation. When designed with care, I think when you design it with care and actual thought, online sessions can be just as impactful, if not more, than face to face ones. So, as facilitators, and I know that this is something that you're preparing yourself to do, as facilitators, as future facilitators, your job is to adapt to the digital space, but to do so with empathy, to do so with creativity, and to do so with a willingness to experiment. Because, like I said, not everything is going to work. You need to understand your target audience and you need to understand what it is they want and what it is they don't want. And that is, there's not just a target audience, but like there's the sub target audience, and then you look at those who are actually on TikTok, who's actually on Instagram, and who is actually online, who is not, who has no idea what Google Meet is. So it's understanding the different audiences within the audience. All right, so it's all quite crazy and exciting. So, some of the principles for effective online training, when designing and facilitating online training, especially for adults, it is crucial that we understand how adults learn best. This is where the training, the theory of an andragogy or adult learning that comes into play, right? So this is a theory that was coined by Malcolm Knowles, and it outlines the core principles of adult learning. And these principles are especially important in the online environment where attention and engagement can be harder to. Let me just, I just need to, just give me a second. I just need to wipe my throat. Right? So it's where attention and engagement can be harder to sustain. So we're just going to explore a little bit the four key principles and how they apply to online training. So the first one is relevance and practicality. Now, adults actually need to know why they are learning something and how it actually applies to their real lives or work. Right? So in an online setting, you have less time to win attention. That's why it's vital to actually connect learning content to real world applications right from the start, right? And you also want to explain why the topic matters, who it affects, and how it is used immediately. Otherwise, you're going to lose them, right? So, um, for example, you might want to start, okay, we're covering this reporting framework today because you'll need it when you're preparing your next story pitch, right? So that's what you can start your session with. Or this technique will help you to run more efficient virtual meetings at work, right? So initially, you want to start it with a clear statement of relevance. What's in it for them? What's in it for me as an adult? I'm sitting here, I have other things to do. Why is this important? Right? So that's how you want to start your session, first of all. Number two is is experience-based learning. Now, adults actually bring rich experiences with them, with us, I should say, and we want those experiences to be acknowledged and used, right? So that is something to consider as well in your online, in your preparing your online events and training sessions. Online training should make space for participants to share what they already know. Otherwise, you're gonna feel like they're not being listened to, right? So whether it's through group discussions, breakout rooms, chat prompts, they want to know that their thoughts and their experiences being shared. So instead of viewing learners as blank slates, we need to recognize them as collaborators who can enrich the learning process with their perspectives. Right? So, for example, in a session on climate reporting, in my book, Climate Tracker, for example, in a session on climate reporting, I might invite participants to share examples of stories they've covered or challenges that they've faced in telling those stories, right? So, a tip for this can be like just asking, have you ever, right? Have you ever questions can actually reflect moments to activate experience. So, um, have you ever had to write a story where your life was at risk? Right, that would cause that would cause our fellows at Climate Tracker to share a lot of information, because the fact is reporting on an environment and climate is very dangerous, and we put our lives at risk in a lot of situations, not just our lives but our careers. um have you ever uh have you ever told a story that was that risked you getting blacklisted by the government? You know, like that is going to cause a lot of chaos and mayhem with our fellows at Climate Tracker, for instance, because I can speak to that fact. I have written a story before where the government didn't like it too much. But just those that kind of like prompting of allowing people to be able to share their experience, it really helps with effective online training. Number three, I would say, is self-direction, because adults we like to take ownership of our learning, and we like to think that we have some sort of degree of control, right? So online formats can actually support this really well, I think, through whether it's optional resources, pre-reads, and the ability to just revisit recordings at your own pace, when possible. So you can offer that choice. Example, um, you can do the activity using Google Docs or Miro, or choose one of the three case studies that interest you most, and you give them that option to think of what is of their interest and what sort of like they can control their learning process. All right, because they've been through it all, they've been through a lot, and you want them to be able to trust your, not just trust, but you want to allow them to guide their own learning experience, right? So lead with that sort of intuition. So they can bring their own questions. They might be able to read something before, read some articles, read some resources before, and then bring their own questions to you in the session. So I think my tip here would be to build in options to let participants make small decisions during the session. You are the one facilitating it all, But if you can let them make small decisions in this space, that is very, very helpful. And the last point here for principles of effective online training is interactivity. Um, and this just speaks to, I think, the fact that learning is most effective when it's active, not passive, right? Because I think you might agree with me that the worst online trainings are ones where a trainer talks for 60 minutes. And I know that I'm speaking a lot right now, but it's just because I'm actually telling you how to run a proper online training session. Okay? So, yeah, it's for 60 minutes and with no pause, no interaction. And I'm just doing this way because I have to. All right. But adults actually learn better when they can participate, whether that's through answering questions, doing quick polls, solving problems, discussing in small groups. And you can even do this in simple ways like using a chat box, reaction emojis, collaborative documents, um, two-person, three-person breakout rooms. Using that session, that interactivity is going to be very important for your sessions that you're going to run in the future. And you can aim some form of interaction every 5 to 10 minutes is what I would say. That's my tip for that point. Is every like 10 minutes you have some form of interaction. All right. So in short, um, make your online training sessions more effective for adult learners by making it relevant and useful, connecting it to their existing experiences, giving them autonomy and choice, and also keeping them engaged and interacting throughout your event. All right, so by designing your sessions with these principles in mind, you're not only improving their learning outcomes, you're also showing respect for the adult learners' time, their intelligence, and their lived experience, right? At the end of the day. Okay, so I want to just take a pause um in the chat to see what's going on. Okay, so Katrina had a boba. Oh, she craved boba, but she got some shopping done. That's great. Whoa, I need. Oh, whoa, I need. I love that, Angelique. Thank you so much. Sharing. All right, cool. So I hope that you guys are actually. I'm trying to like make use of the time, right? That's why I'm going. Um, but the next thing that I want to talk about is designing a strong online session. Some of the points that I have for you when it comes to online training structure. Structure is everything. Structure is everything. Unlike in-person spaces where you can adapt quickly to the energy in the room, online sessions require deliberate planning but also flexibility to change course if needed. I have been in sessions, guys, where online sessions where the awkwardness was just too real. The awkwardness was just too real, and it's like, where do I go from here? But like I said, you learn as you get into it, you learn what to do next. All right, but at the end of the day, what I would say is that I would advise you to structure your sessions as much as possible. So let's break this down into four key components for a strong design. Number one is clear objectives. So use SMART goals, right? What do you want participants to learn? What do you want them to feel or do by the end of your session, right? Every effective session will start with clear objectives, not just vague goals like learn something new, but SMART goals. Make it specific, make it measurable, make it achievable, make it relevant, and make it time bound, right? So set out your SMART goals for and objectives for your online session. So, for example, by the end of the session, participants will be able to identify three techniques for improving audience engagement during online workshops, right? That is a clear SMART goal, right? Example, right? So these actually help you to stay focused and to allow your participants to clearly understand what they're getting out of the experience. So my tip for this is to state your learning objectives at the beginning of your session to create shared expectations so they know what they're getting themselves into. All right. Number two is to use varied formats because no one wants to stare at slides for an hour straight. I'm no, I know in this particular situation you're staring at slide, but it's just because I'm telling you what to do for your sessions that you will lead eventually, all right? But no one actually wants to stare at slides for an hour straight. So attention spans online are short, so use different formats to keep things fresh, whether it's a short video clip, to set the context, a clear visual slide presentation, whether it's question and answer time to interact and clarify, if it's small breakout groups for discussion, whether it's a live demo or a share screen. Varying your formats actually caters to different learning styles, right? So whether it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic learners, they all benefit from different modes of engagement, right? So plan your format like a playlist. I love music, guys. All right. Tyrell would know I'm a Swiftie, right? But plan your format like a playlist. So like switch it up every 10 to 15 minutes because you have different learning styles that you have to engage with. So think about it in that way when you're planning your online event. All right, different learning styles. Is it catering for the visual? Is it catering for the auditory? Is it catering for the kinesthetic? Right? So people who need to see, people who need to hear, people who need to act. All right, you want to cater for all of us. Um, so for me, for instance, I'm very all of them, but I'm very auditory as well. So if you play a little Taylor Swift, I'm gonna remember that session for the rest of my life. Right. So the third one is balance your timing. All right. So structure your hour so there's space for engagement, not just delivery. So a good rule of thumb is to have your core content, but also have time for interaction, reflection, and question and answers because you don't want to pack a session so tightly with slides that people leave without a chance to reflect, to ask questions, or to apply what they've actually learned, right? So build in intentional pause moments, mini check-ins, polls, or just like think and share activities. All right. Number four, always have a plan B, right? So tech issues are amok, right? They run amok when we least expect it, but at least when we least wanted to. Tech issues, low energy, missing facilitators. Like I've been in sessions where I was just emailing the trainer like 5 minutes ago and then they don't show up for a session. And then it's like, what do I do? So missing facilitators, anything can happen, right? So always have a backup plan in case your video isn't playing, in case your internet drops, in case participants aren't engaging with a planned activity. And you would think, for example, I can give you an example for this one. So our fellows are journalists. You would expect that they would have questions to ask, right? You would expect that journalists would be just like buzzing with questions, but sometimes no. Sometimes they're just taking it in. And so you might be in a session, like I was in a couple sessions, for instance, where the trainer is just like, okay, any questions? No questions. In that situation, I have questions planned, right? So you always have a backup plan, right? Participants aren't engaging in planned activities. You run short or long on time, so always have, this might look like having offline copies of your slides or videos, a similar backup activity. You might have a co-host who can step in if your internet drops. So my tip in this particular one would be to save your most flexible activity for last. It can be shortened or expanded depending on how time goes. All right, so always have a plan B. So in summary here, guys, start with a clear, smart objective. Use varied formats to keep people engaged. Be mindful of balanced timing and always be prepared to pivot when needed. All right, because good design creates a structure that supports both learning and connection. But great facilitation is about knowing when to stick to plan and when to shift gears up. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide. Knowing when to pivot. Pivot. That reminds me of Friends. Anyway, so exam, right? Okay, so an example that I have here, example of online session structure. This is like a general look at how I usually structure sessions. You might want to start with an icebreaker, as you notice that's what I did in this session, and then you want to get in the before I say that, the, people usually overlook icebreakers. Icebreakers are very important. You can take icebreakers in a lot of different directions. It can be a poll, it can be a quick question, but you want to start with something light to make people feel a little bit more comfortable. This could be a Zoom poll with a fun or relevant question. For example, it can be a typer you answer in the chat, which is what I did at the start of this session, right? That was a prompt. It can be where you're joining from. Actually, by the way, if you want, you can drop your flag in the chat right now. That would be great because I like to actually memorize flags. It can be one word to describe how you're feeling today, but what it really does is that it sets a tone for interactivity and gives the participants a voice early on, right? Which makes them actually more likely to be engaged. So tailor your icebreaker to your audience. If it's younger people, if it's older people, if it's more mature people, if it's people that are maybe professionals, if it's more like laid back people, you want to understand the people that you're dealing with, right? So what works for journalists might not work for academics, might not work for civil servants, might not work for diplomats, right? So you want to understand, you really want to understand your audience. And if you have a mixture of people, you want to understand how to reach each and every one of them, right? So then from the icebreaker, you want to go into your core content, and that's going to take a little bit of time. If this is actually the heart of your session, it's your teaching moment, and you want to present your key messages clearly and concisely using a mixture of formats, is what I would say, right? So try to keep your content delivery as dynamic as possible, and then you want to get into interaction. So that might look like breakout groups, chat discussions, and this is where people, the learners, can actively participate. All right, and then you want to wrap up and you want to give people a chance to give you information. You may one day want to give you feedback, question and answers, revisit the original learning objective, things like that. All right, so you want to also encourage flexibility. So this structure that I am sharing here with you is just a template, it's not set in stone. You might actually need a longer discussion segment for smaller groups, less question and answers if the group is shy, and so on. Right? So some tools for flexibility, some tools for engagement are, oh, I'm seeing messages in the chat. I'm seeing flags. Let me see if I could name every flag. Okay, so I see Jamaica. So Sasha is from Jamaica. Chauncey is from Guyana. Bianca is from St. Lucia. My brother-in-law is from St. Lucia, Bianca. So hi. Zadie is from Grenada. Tamika is from Antigua and Barbuda. And I got, yeah, okay, I think I got all the flags. So thanks, guys. So, some tools for to boost engagement, right? When you're running an online session, guys, you your greatest ally is interactivity. The more you create space for people to engage, contribute to co-create, the more memorable that and effective your training session will be. So, some tools I think that I can that I have used before and I would advise you to look into: Zoom, definitely; Jamboard, definitely; Miro, definitely. That allows for visual collaboration. Mentimeter and Slido, also great for live polls and quizzes. And Google Docs for co-editing. I love Google Docs. I absolutely am obsessed with Google Docs, because it allows for real-time co-editing, right? So you can collaboratively write your ideas. You can capture good feedback. You can make comments. You can assign roles, document tasks. Google Docs is, for me, is everything. All right, so those really, really, really help with engagement. And some interactivity ideas that I can share with you as well, um, is to start with a temperature check, use the chat frequently, run mini challenges or quizzes, and ask questions and assign short tasks throughout your session. You want to split this up across your 1 hour, 2 hours, all right, just to keep people going. Some other just like minor common challenges and quick fixes. Tech tech glitches. Make sure you have backup slides and a phone hotspot. Low energy. Ad breaks. Music and surprise polls. So like in a session, for instance, I remember I was leading this session on um I mentioned I'm a Swiftie before, right? So y'all have to excuse me. I was leading this session on energy transition. And there's this whole thing with Taylor and her private jet and whatnot, and the fact that the media just took it out of control and like was assuming that she's the celebrity with the most emissions and so on, which is not true, by the way. But people just took that headline and ran with it. And in this session, like I remember just randomly starting to play some Taylor Swift music, and just to get the conversation going about it, and people gave really good feedback about it afterwards. Like, they learned a lot, blah blah blah. So just adding breaks where you have music, where you have surprise polls, where you have breakout rooms is really good. If you feel like the energy is dropping in the room online, if you have quiet participants, you can call on people, but do it in a kind way. Don't just like drop a hammer on somebody's head, just kind of like do it in a nice way. If you have off topic drift, you can uh, re anchor to the goals. So you can restructure, you re mention your goals as well. All right. Okay. Let me just take a minute. Let me just take a second to. Okay. So some some pro tips for success. Okay, so this is where I want to wrap up tonight's session with some of my favorite practical tips that have helped me run smoother and more engaging online training sessions, especially when things don't go quite as planned. So these are just these are just little things that can make a big, big, massive, massive difference. Number one is to prepare, and I keep saying this over and over because it's very important, is to prepare slides and backups. Always design clear visual slides that support, not replace, but support your spoken content. Right? So you see me talking, talking, talking here, right? But it's because I have my slides to lead me, right? And keep slides minimalist. So you would notice that my slides, for instance, they don't just have sentences and sentences and sentences and no, points. Points that I can then explain. All right? So keep your slides minimalist. Few words, more space, use visuals where possible. Right? And a big one is to have backups, as I said. Save your slides as a PDF in case your screen sharing fails, and keep your session plan and keynotes in a second tab or printed nearby. So, example, I once lost internet connection mid-session, and I had to email my co-host the PDF version of my slides beforehand. I did that beforehand, and they took over while I reconnected, right? Lifesaver. So they that my colleague Johannes, he had the PDF of my presentation. He was able to take over because my internet dropped, right? Because you never know what is going to happen with TN Tech. That is our electricity provider in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So use a co-host when possible. That just leads into that point. If you can, never try to do an event by yourself because it can go haywire. Um, if you have a co-host, they can monitor the chat, they can let in latecomers, they can launch polls and manage breakouts, they can step in if you drop off a call, and this really frees up your time to focus on the teaching aspect of things or the event running aspect of things, right? So that is really important as well. um and then rehearse your tech flow as well. Test your tech before the session every time. Mic, camera, screen sharing, breakout settings, pause, run through everything, and make sure that you rehearsing in a way that helps you to feel more confident and helps you to spot potential glitches. All right, super important. Record the session if appropriate. It depends on what your audience is, and then also be as human as possible. Show your personality. People don't want a robot. They don't want to sit down for like an hour, 2 hours. I have stopped having. I've stopped using background. Like you can create a background and put it on your Zoom or your Google Meet. I stopped using that because I want people to see that I'm a real person, and I'm literally sitting on the floor right now. Um, you can see that I'm sitting on the floor right now doing this presentation. Like, just be human. Show your personality. People don't want a robot, they want a real person. It's okay to stumble, it's okay to tell a short story, it's okay to check in with the audience. And that actually creates that personality where they can connect with you and feel like they've actually learned something. So when you show up authentically, you can build connection and trust, and that can happen through a screen. Like, I am talking to you right now, you can see that I am in a random attic in Lisbon, Portugal. Right? So I actually once started a session with a story about coffee spilling on my laptop. And people laughed, and it immediately warmed up the space. So just be personable as much as possible. Be human. Alright, so my final thing for you tonight, guys, is preparation builds your confidence, but presence. If there's one thing I want you to take away tonight, is that preparation is important. Preparation builds your confidence, but presence builds your connection, right? And connection is what you want to have with your audience at the end of the day. The best online sessions are not perfect, but they are well prepared, they're human, and they're responsive, right? So don't be afraid to make it your own. Make it your personality, make it based on who you are. All right, so that is it. Thank you again. Thank you again for the gift of your attention today. I hope that you leave here feeling a little bit more confident, a little bit more equipped, a little bit more ready to create truly meaningful online learning spaces. And yeah, have a great day, I guess. Back to you, Tyrell.
All right. Hi, good night, everyone. So we had a very great session. Thank you very much for joining. I will just let my co-coordinator, Anthea Atkinson, leave you all with some nice words and close up the session. Anthea?
Good night, everyone. Before I close the session off, Design, I have a question for you. Um, when calling out persons, so what I tend to do I usually try to, because I don't want to offend anyone, I stick to persons that I'm more familiar with. But you can't always do that because you don't always know everyone in your crowd. Could you give some examples of how you can approach others and get others involved?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. Thank you so much. I think yes, we do tend to call on people that we know. So for instance, I am very familiar with Tyrell. I'm very familiar with Katrina. I might call on those people. Shahad, I see Shahad is here. But we might be tempted to call on those people, but I think my tip for calling on people that you don't know is just to, first of all, make them feel as comfortable as possible. You don't want them to feel like if you're just like shining the spotlight on them randomly. But I would say start with an easy question. If it's a question that you're asking them, like start with a question that is not intimidating, and then that might get them into this space. Or you might simplify your question first, and then as they get more comfortable with their answer, then lead into a deeper question. You know what I mean? So just like make them feel comfortable at first is what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that tip and all the tips that you gave us today. I mean, I joined a bit late. I'm sorry about that, guys. We had blackout. Guyana is known as the land of many blackouts, not just many waters. Yeah, but from where I joined, I mean, it was a great session. I totally enjoyed your tips, and I know the rest of the team, they're going to take the presentation to heart, and it's definitely going to be useful for them in planning events. So thank you so much for taking the time to engage us today. And I know I'm excited about tomorrow's presentation.
Thank
So
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow as well.